This sign belongs to the family of danger signs and was introduced in 1963. It announces one or more light signals of type R11V, R11J, R13, R14, or R22.
This announcement is made about 150 meters before the danger in rural areas and about 50 meters in urban areas.
The placement of the sign can vary for several reasons. In this case, usually, an M1 sign indicates the distance to the danger. This sign is complemented by a B14 speed limit sign. If multiple traffic lights follow one another or are less than 300 meters apart, only the first light is indicated by an A17 type sign. This sign indicates a dangerous right turn. In open countryside, it was placed about 150 meters from the bend, whereas in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On the highway, the curve is announced about 200 meters ahead. This sign is part of the warning signs and can be supplemented by a plaque indicating the exact distance to the bend. It was crucial to alert drivers so they could adjust their speed and driving to the road layout. This sign indicates a dangerous left turn. In the countryside, it is placed about 150 meters from the turn, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On the highway, the turn is announced about 200 meters ahead. This sign is part of the warning signs and can be supplemented by a plaque indicating the exact distance to the bend. It is essential to warn drivers so they can adjust their speed and driving to the road layout. The A2B type sign is used in France to indicate a speed bump of the Dodane type. A speed bump is a hump present on the road. This warning is made about 50 meters before the danger in built-up areas. Speed bumps are commonly encountered in urban areas, but very rarely in rural areas. The placement of the sign may vary for several reasons. In a 30 km/h zone, using this signage is not really useful. In the case of multiple speed bumps occurring in succession, a warning sign of type M2 is used. Speed bumps are also supplemented by C27 position signage. The A2B sign is graphically distinguished from the A2A sign by the presence of a single, bold bump, while the A2A sign features a bump, Dodane, a dip, and another bump, Dodane. The A2B sign, indicating a speed bump of the Dodane type, appeared following the division of the A2 type sign by a decree on January 10, 1986. This sign was provided for by the International Conventions of Vienna and Geneva in 1968 and 1973. The A7 type sign is used in France to announce a level crossing equipped with manual barriers or automatic half barriers. In the countryside, it is placed about 150 meters from the level crossing, accompanied by 3 J10 markers located 150 meters and 100 meters away, and 50 meters from the danger. If the level crossing is equipped with automatic light signals, an M9Z sign with the words automatic signal may be added. Outside built-up areas, a speed limit sign B14 can also complement this signaling. This sign warns drivers of an approaching level crossing, encouraging them to slow down and stop if necessary, thus ensuring their safety and those of other road users. The A13A type sign is used in France to indicate a location frequented by children, such as schools, training grounds, or learning centers. Games or summer camps. In open countryside, it should be placed about 150 meters from the location, while in urban areas, it is installed at about 50 meters. This danger sign is not supplemented by a position signal. It is often used at the entrance of rest areas and service areas on highways, due to the frequent presence of children and families. Introduced in 1952, it evolved over the years to become more stylish, with redesigned characters and improved signage for better visibility. The A14 type sign is used in France to signal any danger for which there is no specific sign. In rural areas, it should be placed about 150 meters from the danger, whereas in urban areas, it is installed between 0 and 50 meters away. On the highway, the hazard is announced approximately 200 meters in advance. This sign can be supplemented with a Type M9Z plaque specifying the nature of the danger, such as factory exit or frequent fog. Introduced in 1946, this sign is essential for alerting drivers to various and often unforeseen dangers, helping them adapt their driving accordingly. The A3A type sign is used in France to indicate a road narrowing on the right. In rural areas, it is placed about 150 meters from the danger, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On highways, the danger warning is made about 200 meters ahead. This sign is part of the warning signs and can be complemented by a plate indicating the exact distance to the narrowing. The A8 type sign is used in France to indicate an unbarred level crossing. In open country, it is moved to about 150 meters from the level crossing. This warning sign is essential to alert drivers of an upcoming unprotected level crossing, urging them to be extremely cautious. In some cases, advanced signage is supplemented by a seal panel of type M9Z, stating flashing FE. This sign, introduced in 1946, saw its final form adopted in 1977 with a white background and a red border. The type AQA sign is used in France to indicate the presence of a K6 or a speed bump on the road. A cassis is a dip in the road, while a doudaine is a bump. In rural areas, this sign is placed around 150 meters from the obstacle, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On the highway, danger is announced about 200 meters ahead. The A2A sign is distinguished from the A2B sign by the graphic representation of a bump or a dip and another bump. Unlike the A2B sign, which has only one bump, it is sometimes complemented with a sign saying "Low Vehicle Caution" to warn of potential difficulties for certain vehicles. Variable road depth signals are of type XM. There are 15 signals of this type in France. They have white or yellow dot matrix on a black background. When they are turned off, they don't just show a black screen. They can be associated with a variable danger signal of type X, regulation type XB, indication and service type XC, diagrammatic type X1 or X2, or temporary type like XAK or XKD. The AB1 sign was introduced in France by the General Instruction of 1946 under the name Sign AB1. Name A1. It was then on a cream background, surrounded by a border and a blue cross. However, it existed long before that. In 1949, the International Geneva Protocol defined it with a red border and a black cross on a white background. The French Circular of 1952 changed these colors. Still on a cream background, it is now surrounded by a red border and a cross that remains blue. It retains its A1 number. In 1955, its name changed. It is now called the A9. Following the First International Convention in 1968, the Decree of July 23, 1970, modified these colors. It keeps its red border, but its cross becomes black. The A1D sign is used in France to warn of a series of 2 or more curves, with the first one being to the left. This sign is placed approximately 150 meters from the danger in open country and about 50 meters in urban areas. On the highway, the danger is announced about 200 meters ahead. The A9B type sign is used in France to indicate a tramway crossing in urban areas. This signage is mandatory if it is accompanied by an R24 type light signal. The location sign is the C2000C type sign, which can be confused with the C7 type sign. An M9 type sign stating priority to tramway can be used when position lights are absent, thus complementing the advanced signaling and, in some cases, the C20C sign. Established in 1998, the sign was renamed A9B in 2018. The A3 type sign is used in France to indicate a narrowing of the road. In rural areas, it is placed about 150 meters from the danger, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On highways, the announcement is made at about 200 meters. When the narrowing is symmetrical, or the layout does not allow attributing it to a specific side, this sign is used. In case of a specific narrowing on one side, the A3A or A3B signs are used. This advanced signage can be supplemented by alternating traffic signs or traffic lights. The A13B type sign is used in France to indicate a pedestrian crossing. In the countryside, it is placed about 150 meters from the danger, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. If several pedestrian crossings follow one another, a relaxed type M2 sign is used. Advanced signaling is mandatory at the countryside, while in urban areas, a position signal, like ground marking or a type C20A sign may be enough. In case of a raised pedestrian crossing, a panel indicating raised crossing can be added. The A413B sign has evolved since its introduction in 1963, with graphic changes in 1977 and 2000. The type A16 sign is used in France to indicate a dangerous descent. In open country, it is placed about 150 meters from the hazard, while in built-up areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. On the highway, the announcement is made at approximately 200 meters. This sign is justified, especially when the gradient is more than 10% on the road and 4% on the highway or expressway. The slope value is indicated on the sign. It can be supplemented with a panel M1 indicating the distance to the danger. Two A16 signs are generally placed before the slope, with reminders along the descent. The C111 sign is used in France to indicate the entrance of a tunnel longer than 300 meters. This signage is mandatory. This sign implies a ban on U-turns, stopping or parking, and the obligation to turn on low-beam headlights. It should only be installed as a position marker and supplemented with an M2 panel indicating the length of the tunnel. For tunnels longer than 3,000 meters, the remaining distance to travel in the tunnel is indicated every 1,000 meters. A M10Z sign with the tunnel's name can be added to the C111 sign. The A18 sign is used in France to indicate the boundary between a one-way section and a two-way section. This sign, once in place, unique as a position signal among danger signs. It is often placed about 150 meters from the configuration change in open country and about 50 meters in urban areas. When used in advanced signaling, it is accompanied by an M1 sign indicating the distance. On certain stretches of single-lane roads, the A18 panel can be supplemented with an M9 type panel and a speed limit to improve safety. Introduced in 1965, this sign underwent graphic modifications in 1977 to improve its visibility. The A21 sign is used in France to indicate cyclists coming from the left or right. This announcement is made about 150 meters from the danger outside urban areas and between 0 and 50 meters within urban areas. Cyclists may only exit from a lane or bike path, a mountain biking's or cycle touring route, or a greenway. This sign appeared in 1967 and underwent graphical modifications in 1977, where the depicted cyclist no longer wears a hat. It can be complemented by a sign indicating additional information. The A15A2 type sign is used in France to indicate a zone where animals, such as sheep, are likely to cross the road. This sign is generally used near agricultural farms. It is installed about 150 meters from the hazard. The A15A2 sign shows a sheep, unlike the A15A1 sign, which shows a cow. An M2 type extension sign can be used if the animal crossing area is extensive or poorly defined. This sign was introduced in 1963 and modified in 1977 to create two variants, A15A1 and A15A2. The A6 type sign is used in France to indicate the presence of a drawbridge. In open countryside, this sign is placed about 150 meters from the danger, while in urban areas, it is installed about 50 meters away. This sign may be supplemented with an additional panel indicating the distance to the hazard. Position signaling is reinforced with dynamic barriers of the XK3 type and possibly R24 stop signals. Established in 1946, the A6 sign was modified in 1952 and 1977, adopting its current form with a white background and a wider red border. The type A24 sign is used in France to indicate a danger zone due to crosswinds. It is generally placed near viaducts or exposed areas where drivers risk being affected by wind gusts. This sign can be supplemented by a fixed message sign, FMS, which indicates a speed reduction in case of strong winds. The A20 type sign is used in France to indicate an opening onto a quay or bank with some danger. This announcement is made about 150 meters from the hazard outside urban areas and between 0 and 50 meters within urban areas. The sign is often used as a position marker. The A4 type sign is used in France to indicate a slippery road. In the countryside, it's placed about 150 meters from the danger, whereas in urban areas, it's installed about 50 meters away. The placement may vary, and a sign might indicate the distance or extent of the danger. The A4 sign alone does not indicate ice, but it can be accompanied by a panel mentioning frequent ice or risk of ice. This sign is often used in temporary signaling with the AK4 sign. Established in 1952, it was modified in 1977 with a white background and a wider border. The AB4 type sign is used in France to indicate an intersection, where drivers must make a complete stop and yield to users of the intersected road. Its installation must be preceded by a decree and should be done as close as possible to the edge of the addressed roadway. Exceptionally, if there are islands separating two traffic lanes, the AB4 sign can be repeated on these islands. This sign is inseparable from a solid line 50 centimeters wide that extends across the full width of lanes where stopping is mandatory. Introduced in 1955, the AB4 sign evolved to the octagonal red shape with the word stop, to stand out from other signs, even from the other side. The AB3A sign is used in France to indicate the obligation to yield at the intersection to users of the other road without having to come to a complete stop. It can only be installed as a position signal. The AB3 sign is inseparable from a dashed line 50 centimeters wide made up of several squares, unless it is associated with traffic lights. Established in 1946 under the name Einbus, it has evolved in terms of design and coding, adopting its current form with a widened red border by the decree of July 25, 1974. The AB1 type sign is used in France to indicate an intersection, where drivers must yield to vehicles coming from there or from roads located to their right. Optional. Most of the time, its installation becomes mandatory at the intersection of two main roads if the right-of-way rule is exceptionally maintained. A distance marker can be added if the intersection it indicates is less than 100 meters or more than 200 meters away. In urban areas, this distance is defined as more than 150 meters. Established in 1946 under the name A1, it has evolved in terms of design and coding. It adopted its current form by the decree of the 26th of July, 1964, with a widened red border and a black cross on a white background. The AB25 type sign is used in France to indicate a roundabout ahead. This signage is mandatory. It can be used as advanced signage or positioning on roads leading to the yield line. The AB7 type sign is used in France to indicate the end of a road's priority status. It is placed where the priority status is interrupted, except in the case of a roundabout, where the loss of priority is indicated by the AB25 sign and in the absence of the D42B sign. Outside of urban entry and exit cases, and without a distance sign, it indicates that the priority regime changes at the next encountered intersection. At the beginning or end of a built-up area, when the road loses its priority status, the AB7 sign is placed above the EB10 or EB20 sign. When complemented by a distance panel sign of type M1, the loss of priority occurs at the intersection located at the indicated distance. The use of this sign with the AB7 sign is mandatory if there is another secondary junction between the AB7 sign placement and the secondary junction, or the loss of priority occurs. The type AB2 sign is at the back of the screens. Is used to signal the approach of an intersection with a road where users must give way, in the case where a sign AB6 cannot be used. The AB6 type sign is used in France to indicate or remind of the priority status of a road. It is placed at the beginning of a priority road section or before the first intersection encountered. Before an ambiguous intersection, a type M7 diagram panel can be added. The end of a priority road is indicated by the AB7 sign. Established in France by the decree of 23rd July 1970, this sign follows the International Convention of 1968. Sign type C207 is used in France to indicate the beginning of a motorway section. This signage is mandatory. Installed as position signaling, it may be supplemented by an M3 sign and must be supplemented by an M10 sign. A. If access to the motorway is via an interchange or M10. B. If the interchanges are numbered. If the highway entrance is via the main section, the C207 sign can be supplemented by an M10A sign. This sign has been planned in France since 1959 and was introduced by the order of October 22, 1963, under the name C7. The type B2B sign is used in France to indicate a prohibition to turn right at the next intersection. The distance between the sign and the intersection depends on the layout of the area. This prohibition may apply to a certain category of vehicles using an M4 type sign, introduced by the circular of January 19, 1952, under the code B14 for the no left turn. It was later coded as B2. In 1955, the final form of the sign was established by the orders of June 6 and 7, 1977. The type B6A1 sign is used in France to indicate a no parking zone on the roadway and its dependencies, sidewalk, shoulder. To all motorized vehicles, this prohibition applies up until the next intersection, unless otherwise indicated by a B39 sign. The restriction can apply to certain categories of vehicles, indicated by an M4 sign. This sign was introduced in 1946 as B9, renamed B6 in 1955, and eventually coded B6A1 in 1977. The B2A sign is used in France to indicate a no left turn at the next intersection. The placement distance of the sign relative to the intersection depends on the specific layout of the area. This prohibition can apply to a certain category of vehicles. In this case, an M4 type sign is used. Established in 1952 under the code B14, it was renamed B2A in 1955. The definitive shape of the sign, with a more pronounced arrow, appeared in the decrees of June 6 and 7, 1967. The B11 type sign is used in France to prohibit access to vehicles whose width, including load, exceeds the limit indicated on the sign. It was placed directly at or just before the narrow passage. Often, advance warning of the narrowed passage is given by signs of type A3, A3A, or A3B, supplemented by an M9Z seal sign. Distance signaling is done by the B11 sign, supplemented by an M1 distance panel. Established in 1952 under code B15, it was renamed B11 in 1955. The B4 type sign is used in France to indicate the proximity of a customs post where stopping is mandatory. The sign displays the word douane in French and in the neighboring country's language, douane, zoll. In the case of a mobile customs post, the signage can be reinforced with a light signal of type R1. This sign, introduced in 1946 under code B11, was renamed B4 in 1955. The order of June 6, 1977, gave it its current appearance. It's used less and less due to the disappearance of fixed customs posts within the European Union. The B5A type sign is used in France to indicate the proximity of a mobile roadblock by the gendarmerie, where stopping is mandatory. The B9H type sign is used in France to prohibit access to motorcycles and light motorcycles. It is placed at the entrance of the area where the regulation applies. According to Article R, 311.1 of the Highway Code, a motorcycle is a two-wheeled motor vehicle, not meeting the definition of a moped, and whose power does not exceed 73.6 kg. The B12 type sign is used in France to prohibit vehicle access, having a proper loaded height, including those exceeding the limit indicated on the sign. This signage is placed near low-clearance passages or at an intersection on the road that crosses this structure. In that case, a distance sign of type M1 is used. The height limit indicated on the sign should be between 20 centimeters to 30 centimeters less than the minimum height of the structure. Any passage under a free height of 430 meters under the structure is theoretically indicated. On the highway, this signal is made from 4.75 meters. The B12 sign can be repeated on the structure in the lane axis in the case of a bridge or tunnel. Near an electrified railway crossing, a B12 sign will be used in cases where the contact wires are at a height of less than 6 meters from the road or rail. The height comes out corset. The indicated height limit will be less than 1.30 meters from the contact wires if the normal voltage exceeds 1,500 volts, otherwise 1.30 meters. At Weigersau for 5 minutes, the proximity of the limited coercion zone, especially in the case of railway bridges, can be indicated by the sign A14, complemented by an M9Z panel stating around the railway bridge. Limited by XM, the B9G type sign is used in France to prohibit access to mopeds. It is located at the entrance of the zone where the regulation applies. According to Article R311-1 of the Highway Code, a moped is a 2- or 3-wheeled vehicle whose maximum speed by design does not exceed 45 kilometers per hour and is equipped for a 2-wheeled moped with an engine displacement not exceeding 50 cubic centimeters if it's an internal combustion engine, or with a maximum net power not exceeding 4 kilowatts for other types of engines. For a 3-wheeled moped with an engine displacement not exceeding 50 cubic centimeters if it has spark ignition, or with a maximum net power not exceeding 4 kilowatts for other types of engines. The orders of the 6th and 7th of June, 1977, created the sign prohibiting access to mopeds. Its shape and appearance have not changed since its creation. The B0 type sign is used in France to indicate that traffic is prohibited for all vehicles in both directions. It is placed on the roadway where this restriction applies at the start of the restriction or in the immediate vicinity. It can be complemented by a sign and a barrier of type XK3 marking the prohibition of crossing. The B0 type sign does not apply to pedestrians. It is also used in variable signaling with the same name for dynamic road closure measures on divided roadways. By the orders of June 6th and 7th, 1977, the sign prohibiting traffic in both directions was established. Its shape and appearance have not changed since its creation. The C29C type sign is used in France to indicate the start of a 3-lane road section, 1 voice in one direction and 2 voices in the other. This signage is mandatory and only installed as a position sign that must be accompanied by an M2 type panel. This sign was proposed in 1988 by the Center for Technical Equipment Studies, CT, and instated by the Decree of May 25, 1993. Its current definition was confirmed by the Decree of February 11, 2008. The B15 sign is used in France to signal a CD, the switch to opposite direction traffic at narrow passages, where passing is difficult. It is placed facing the traffic, on the side where the traffic does not have priority. On the other side of the narrow passage, in the opposite direction, a C18 sign is installed. This sign notifies the prohibition of entering the narrow passage. When it is not possible to cross this passage without forcing the oncoming vehicles to stop, this sign should be installed when the length of the narrowed section does not exceed 50 meters. This signage is only effective for peak traffic below 100 vehicles per hour. The installation of R111V type traffic lights should be considered for higher traffic volumes. The B15 sign was part of a European project as early as 1957, but it was only adopted by international conventions in 1968 and 1973. In France, our sources confirmed. It was approved by the Permanent Signaling Commission in 1970 and officially established by decree in 1977. It has not evolved since. The Type B1 sign is used in France to prohibit access to all motor vehicles. A circular dated the 19th of January, 1952, introduced this sign indicating no entry for all motor vehicles. At that time, motorcycles were not distinguished. In 1955, it was codified as B7, and the ban for motorcycles was specified in the sign's definition. It was only in 1977 that panels B7A and B7B were distinguished. The sign B7A, unlike the sign B7B, does not prohibit access to mopeds. A B10A type panel is used in France to prohibit access to a vehicle or a set of vehicles of a certain length, including the load. Understood. Longer than the length indicated on the sign. It is placed at the entrance of the area where the rule applies. The BDISA sign was part of a European project in 2019. In 1964, it was then adopted by international conventions in 1968 and 1973. It was established through a Permanent Signaling Commission validation in 1970 and was officially adopted by a decree in 1977. It hasn't changed since. The B3 type sign is used in France to prohibit access to motor vehicles, except for mopeds. This sign is placed at the beginning of the relevant road section. If this restriction applies only to a certain distance, we complete the sign with an M1 distance marker, or, if it applies over a certain length, with an M2 range marker. The B17 type sign is used in France to prohibit vehicles from driving without keeping the distance mentioned on the sign. It is generally complemented by an M2 extant panel. A sign without a plate, placed on a structure, indicates that the restriction applies along the entire length of that structure. The B17 sign was approved by the Permanent Signaling Commission in 1970. The B13A type sign is used. Sent to France to prohibit vehicle access, weighing on an axle more than the indicated number. It is placed near the restricted area, about 100 meters from the start of the section. Sometimes this prohibition is repeated at intersections. When the start of this regulation occurs at a certain distance from the sign, a distance marker M1 is used. The type B60 sign is used in France to indicate no stopping and no parking. This sign is placed at the start of the road section concerned. If this restriction only applies up to a certain distance, a distance marker M1 is added. Or, if it applies over a certain length by an M2 extent sign. The end of this restriction is usually indicated by a B34A type sign, or a B31 sign if this no parking rule was combined with other restrictions. The B6D sign was adopted in 1967. In 1977, its design changed. A white border now surrounds the red circle. The mention "no parking" was added to its definition. It hasn't changed since. The B9A sign is used in France to prohibit pedestrian access. It is installed at the entrance to the area where the regulation applies. This sign is often found at the entrance of an expressway. It may also be visible at the entrance of a tunnel or a road bridge. On highways and Quarry Express routes marked by a C507 sign, access is generally forbidden to pedestrians. By the decrees of June 6 and 7, 1977, the B9A sign was created to prohibit pedestrian access. Its shape and appearance have not changed since it was created. The B7A type sign is used in France to prohibit access to all motor vehicles except mopeds. This sign is often found at the entrance of an unpaved road. This restriction may only apply under certain conditions. In this case, a suitable panel is used. For example, this restriction may only apply on weekends and public holidays. This is often the case on small country roads that are also hiking trails. On January 19, 1952, a circular introduced a sign indicating that all cars are prohibited. At that time, motorcycles were not differentiated. The sign was then coded B1. In 1955, it became codified, and in the definition of the sign, the prohibition for motorcycles was specified. It was not until 1977 that signs B7A and B7B were distinguished. The B7A sign, as opposed to the B7B sign, does not prohibit access to mopeds. The B14 sign is used in France to indicate a speed limit. When it only applies to certain vehicles, an M4 type sign is added. Outside urban areas, general speed limits are not indicated, except in case of doubt. Thus, when moving from a section with two separate carriageways to a single carriageway, the speed is indicated. Outside urban areas, a lower speed limit than the general one is indicated after each intersection, except in specific cases. Repetition is done with M2 or M9 type plates. For significant decelerations, an initial B14 sign with an M1 distance panel is recommended, followed by additional B14 signs. In urban areas, The maximum speed is generally 50 kilometers per hour, but it can be reduced to 30 kilometers per hour in residential areas, near schools, or in shared zones. This limit can be raised to 70 kilometers per hour on some sections of the road where pedestrian access and crossings are limited and protected by appropriate devices. Outside urban areas, on two-way roads without a central divider, the speed limit is 80 kilometers per hour. On divided highways with a central median, the speed limit is 110 kilometers per hour. On highways, the limit is 130 kilometers per hour in dry conditions and reduced to 110 kilometers per hour in case of rain or other precipitation. Specific conditions. In case of visibility reduced to less than 50 meters, for example in foggy conditions, the maximum speed is 50 kilometers per hour, regardless of the type of road. Specific limitations may apply in cases of adverse weather conditions or high pollution levels. The B14 sign is not installed in urban areas and does not affect electricity access. If the 50 kilometers per hour limit is not altered by local authorities, only the EB10 sign is needed. If B14 signs are needed, especially in suburban areas, they are supplemented by a M9 marker with the label reminder. For a different limit than the general regulation on a street, it is indicated to all users approaching that street. For a speed limit lower than 50 kilometers per hour throughout the entire city, the measure is indicated at entrances by a B14 sign placed on the EB10 sign support. The C208 sign is used in France to indicate the end of a motorway section. This signage is mandatory. On an exit ramp or at the end of a freeway section, it is placed as a position marker and can be supplemented by an M3 plate. It can also be placed as a pre-sign. The B39 sign indicates the end of a prohibition or obligation. Introduced by the decree of June 6th and 7th, 1977, it has a white background with a black graphic. It is commonly used to indicate to the driver that restrictions or obligations imposed by previous signs are no longer in effect from the location of this sign. The B33 sign is used in France to prohibit vehicle stopping. It is placed at the entrance of the area where the restriction applies. This sign is circular with a blue background bordered by a red circle and a red cross. According to Article R41710 of the French Highway Code, stopping on a road where this sign is present is prohibited and subject to a fine. This sign is crucial for ensuring smooth traffic flow and avoiding traffic jams or hazards related to sudden stops. The B31 sign prohibits access to vehicles except those explicitly authorized by an additional plaque. It is used to protect certain pedestrian or residential areas. The B21D1 type sign is used in France to force users to go straight or turn right at the next intersection. It is thus positioned as an advance signal at an appropriate distance from where the rule applies. This sign can be complemented by a distance plaque of type M1 or a category plaque of type M4. This sign is usually used at intersections to indicate mandatory directions when certain routes are restricted, either due to the existence of a one-way street, a pedestrian zone, or because certain maneuvers are not allowed. This sign was adopted by decree in 1977 and has not changed since. The B21D2 type sign is used in France to force drivers to go straight or left at the next intersection. It is placed as an advance signal at an appropriate distance from the location where the regulation applies. This sign can be supplemented by a distance panel of type M1 or a category M4 panel. This sign is generally used at intersections to indicate mandatory directions when some routes are prohibited due to the existence of a one-way street, a pedestrian zone, or because certain movements are not allowed. This sign was adopted by decree in 1977 and has not changed since. The B21A1 type sign is used in France to require users to go around the obstacle on the road to the right. It is thus placed as a position signal, just in front of the obstacle. This sign can be used in cases where a right-hand detour is necessary, for example for dividing islands or refugees. According to Article R41227 of the Highway Code, any obstacle forming a barrier to the direct progress of a vehicle must be bypassed on the right. However, the B212 type sign is used in France to require users to turn left before the sign. It is thus placed as a position signal right in front of where the regulation applies. This sign is mainly used for intersections and obstacles on the road where such a maneuver is necessary. It should not be confused with sign B21A2, which indicates a mandatory bypass on the left. The current model of the B212 sign was adopted by the decree in 1977 and has not changed since. The B22B type sign is used in France to inform pedestrians that they must use the path at the entrance where it is placed. Furthermore, it informs drivers of vehicles and riders that they are not allowed to use the path or to stop there. This sign may be optionally supplemented by a Type M3 direction seal panel. The end of the obligation is indicated by a Type B41 sign. The B22B sign was proposed in Europe as early as 1964, then in France in 1973. It was finally adopted by decree in 1977. The decree of December 6, 2011 changes its meaning and the prohibitions it implies. It has not changed since then. The B22A type sign is used in France to require cyclists to ride on the bike lane or path where it is placed. It also indicates to pedestrians and other vehicle drivers that they are not allowed to use or stop on this lane. Drivers of personal mobility devices, motorized and light mopeds must use the bike lane or track, unless otherwise decided by the Traffic Police Authority, indicated by a small sign. This sign can be supplemented by a directional seal sign of Type M3. This sign was introduced by General Instruction in 1946 and took its current form by decree in 1977. The decree from December 6, 2011 extends its meaning to 2- or 3-wheeled cycles, and the decree of March 15, 2024 extended its application to motorized personal transportation devices and light mobile scooters. The B22A type sign is used in France to require cyclists to use the bike path or lane where the sign is placed. Furthermore, it indicates to pedestrians and drivers of other vehicles that they are not allowed to use this lane or stop there. Drivers of personal mobility devices, motorized and light mopeds must use the bike lane or track, unless otherwise decided by the traffic authority, indicated by a sign. This sign can be complemented by a directional seal panel of Type M3. This sign was introduced by General Instruction in 1946 and took its current form by decree in 1977. The decree of December 6, 2011 extends its meaning to 2- or 3-wheel cycles, and the decree of March 15, 2024 extended its application to motorized personal mobility devices and light mopeds. The B21C2 type sign is used in France to require users to go left at the next intersection. It is placed as an advance signal at an appropriate distance from the point where the regulation applies. This sign can be supplemented by a distance sign of Type M1 or a category sign M4. This sign is generally used when approaching an intersection to indicate mandatory directions when certain lanes are prohibited, either due to a one-way street of a pedestrian area or because certain maneuvers are not allowed. This sign was adopted by decree in 1977 and has not changed since. The B21A2 sign is used in France to require drivers to bypass the obstacle on the road to the left. It is thus positioned as a location signal right in front of the obstacle. This sign is used in situations where a detour to the left is necessary, for example for separator islands or safety refugees. According to Article R412-27 of the Highway Code, any obstacle blocking the direct path of a vehicle must be bypassed on the left, unless otherwise specified.